Jimmy on the beat, boy. Jimmy on the beat, boy. Jimmy on the beat, boy.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, John J. II, here with Connor Matlock and Cody Almasy. Boys, how we doing tonight?
Doing great, man. Excited to be here with you guys. Talk about some college basketball. Really take our first deep dive into the college basketball landscape as we transition away from college football. And we're gonna go for a new dynamic in the show tonight that I'm real excited to try out. And how you guys feeling?
Me too. Connor, how we feeling tonight, man? Seem to have lost him.
Lost Connor there for a second.
We're so
We'll
passionate
stand
about. So, yeah,
by
looking
and see if we can get him back shortly. Looks like we will. We're going to assume that Connor's doing great, but let's see if he can let us know himself.
There he is. How we doing today, Connor? I don't know if he can hear us.
All right. Well, we'll give him a second here. We'll roll into our first topic of the night, John. We'll just get right into it. Me and you professionals. This is like riding a bike for us. So anything
Yes.
you want to tell the people before we get into the meat and potatoes, as you would say?
I'm just very excited to get into college basketball. It's finally here. We're getting into, the thick of it. Conference play is here. Big Ten basketball is here. We're seeing some big shifts. There's players, there's teams that are leading the nation in certain areas. We're going to get into all that more and more each week from here on out until March. So I'm really excited. There's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of big upsets that we've seen across the league. So there's just there's a lot going on. It's like the Wild West out here in the college basketball landscape. So we're looking forward to it. We're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about the nitty gritty, the ins, the outs, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I couldn't be more happier, man.
All right, so let's get right into it. We're going to start our night off in West Lafayette. Talk about the Purdue Boilermakers, and yeah, the number one team in the country this season, largely due to their 7'4" center, Zach Edey. Edey is averaging over 21.9 points per game. That is fourth in the NCAA, and 13.4 rebounds a game, and that's second in the NCAA. And the big man was just named to the Oscar Robertson Trophy midseason watch list. And I don't know about you guys, but it feels like the
If you've been following Purdue and Zach Edey, I guess Big Ten basketball as a whole for any length of time over the past couple of years, you've certainly heard the name. But now, like you said, averaging over 20 points a game, being willing to get involved on the defensive end, just in the nature of being 7'4", makes it pretty easy to be involved on that side of the court. But yeah, it's been pretty. It's an interesting way to watch basketball when you're so accustomed to successful teams revolving around good guard play. So it's somewhat refreshing to be able to see a back to the basket player, have so much success, and not only individually, but Purdue themselves as a consensus top 5 team. Uh, Certainly a favorite to win the Big Ten at this point, and a team that has a real shot at a national championship should they continue to play the way that they have to this point. So really all the things that you want to see from a team in terms of different pieces and where they can score the diversification of points across not only Edey but having some shooters on the outside as well. So a team that's an effort on the defensive end. It really wanted to watch as we get into the home stretch of the regular season in Big Ten play.
Yeah, exactly. And let's reflect a little bit. Let's talk about the Michigan State Purdue game that happened at the Breslin this past weekend. And it's kind of the elephant in the room. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Zach Edey is a cheat code for Purdue and the Boilermakers. And, there's not really a guy in the league that I can really pick out that's going to be able to match his size. Now, his athleticism, that's up for debate. Now, I think that can be you can D up on his athletic ability, especially down low. You can lock him down. You can try to prevent him to get to the hoop. But if he beats you, he gets that edge, he's going to get in there. Let's look at some stats real quick. This past weekend against the Spartans, 32 points, 6 for 7 from free throw, which is big for a big man. 13 for 26 field goal percentage. And that's just very impressive. I remember looking at the score. I think it was 27-17 Purdue. And at that point, Zach Edey had 17 of those 27 points for the Boilermakers. So to have more points than the rest of the team collectively, that's saying something. And that's, you can kind of say they're leaning on Zach Edey pretty heavily. But does that mean he's the difference maker? I think it's fair to say that he is. Now, if you take him away, is Purdue the same caliber team? I don't think they're even in the same conversation. I don't think they're in the top 5 in the Big Ten if you take away Zach Edey. So it's all up for debate. It's all up for speculation, but there's no way around it. He's a cheat code for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, and before we move on from Zach Edey and Purdue, I just want to point out his improvements, the strides he's made from last year, and everybody was already had their eyes on him last year in the Big Ten. The damage he could do at the glass and collecting rebounds, but I think he's grabbing 6 more boards a game this year and 7 more points. So those are instrumental improvements and definitely a cheat code. Let's see if it'll translate, into the Big Ten tournament and then March Madness. We'll move on to our game of the week. This happened on Tuesday. It's our first time we're going to be talking about a game of the week as far as college basketball goes, and I'm going to let John take the lead on the read here.
For sure. Looking forward to it. So Kansas State and the Wildcats, they stay undefeated at home in the classic college basketball OT thriller against number 2 ranked Kansas and the Jayhawks Tuesday night. And, I was talking up Keontae Johnson quite a bit, and I was giving him a lot of accolades, sitting there, 24 points, really doing what he had to do against the Jayhawks. And, I was very impressed with his performance, first of all. And just looking at him really command the team and do what he had to do to win that game at home, especially a rivalry game in state. I thought it even, it rivaled the hype that you'd see in a Michigan State game. Maybe not this year, but in years past when you see two teams that are ranked, in the Big 12, you're looking at a really good matchup here. Two really good teams facing off, and it was a good game. It was a game worth tuning into. I'm glad I tuned into it. And there's a lot of things that can be taken away. You can really look at any single play, any opportunity to score at the basket, whether it was a three-pointer, whether it was a free throw that was missed, to even send that game to OT in the first place. And then what happened in OT is a whole nother conversation. So it was a great game. Hats off to Kansas State and the Wildcats for winning that one and pulling away with it. And just a great game overall.
Yeah, you talk about Keontae Johnson, the game he had a lot of help off the bench from Desi Stills, who provided 24 points for the Wildcats, and also Naquan Tomlin doing a lot of the intangibles and then some of the dirty work as well, grabbing a bunch of rebounds and then playmaking. And when it came down to it in the throes of the game regulation and then overtime, Jayhawks were fouling out left and right. Grady Dick fouled out. DeJuan Harris Jr. fouled out. And one more Jayhawk that is escaping my thoughts right now fouled out. So some of their best players for the Jayhawks are out of the game in crunch time. And, that kind of helped the end result come about. But Jalen Wilson we need to give him a little bit of love. He was filling it up for the Jayhawks, had a career night, had 38 points and 9 boards to match. What do you got to say about this one, Connor, before we move on to really the elephant in the chat right now?
Yeah, I'll just you guys kind of said it all, but I'll just point out, like you were saying about the foul issues for Kansas. Just looking here at the box score, it looks 3 guys over 40 minutes, a couple of guys over 30, about 30 it looks like. So just operating off a 6-man rotation for the most part. I'm just looking at 9 guys total played. 3 of those guys played less than 5 minutes, or played less than 6 minutes, I guess. So yeah, you start getting to overtime, close games, going to be fouls at the end of games. Interesting, probably development there, I guess, to see a team with a not super deep of a bench. Where do you go if, say, Jalen Wilson fouls out at the end of the game? Where are you going for points? Are you going to KJ Adams? Harris? It doesn't. I'd just be interested to see if Jalen Wilson falls out of that game in overtime. If it would have just been
if we go to second overtime and then he fouls out, where do you go? What do you do? When I like how you point out the 6-man rotation, and then those guys not really getting too much rotation probably as far as regular, like up until now, and then you're throwing them into that environment on the road in Bram Ladge Coliseum there. It's not a nice place, and those Wildcats fans were out there in swarms, and they were loud and letting the Jayhawks hear it. Let's talk about what happened in overtime that really led to the final result. Bill Self calls a timeout. There's about 40 seconds left in overtime. Jalen Wilson, 38 points, like we just discussed. He dials up an absolute further than an NBA 3. It's a bomb, but it's on target. Swish. Kansas goes up by 4. The score would have been 85-81 at that point. But hold up. Check the tape. Bill Self, great head coach, coming off a national championship title, calls timeout right before his star player. And we look back at it, one of his only players left in the game, who could make a shot like that when you need it. And he calls a timeout with 5 seconds left on the shot clock. And Kansas State takes the ball down and scores an alley-oop on the ensuing possession, and the final score ends up being 83-82. What do you guys think about Bill Self's time out there? Was it a little panicked? What do you think was going through his mind?
Bad timing. All you can say is bad timing. But in from a coaching's perspective, you're going to want to call a timeout in that situation. Now, do you let the play kind of develop a little bit more? You got 5 seconds on the shot clock, so you got to make a decision. You're on the clock, literally. You got to make a call. If you're Bill Self, you're the head coach, you got to make a call, and you got to make that call quick. Now, looking at it in hindsight's 2020 always. If you guys didn't know that, that's the case. It's always going to be the case, and that was definitely the case in this scenario in a rivalry game. So Bill Self is looking at himself. He's kind of reflecting now that the dust has settled, and he's kicking himself for it. But I think from a coaching standpoint, you have to make that call for a timeout if you're going to call it. Now, do you wait for there to be 1 second left? You want to leave your offense coming out of the timeout to have an opportunity to score, maybe set up a play, get a couple passes off, max 2 passes, and then a shot quickly. And that's what he was trying to do. He wanted to set that up for when that ball was inbounded to have the offense allow them to have an opportunity to score the basketball and to take the lead. Now, like you said, if he didn't call the timeout there, that's a 4-point game compared to a 1-point game that wound up being the detriment to Kansas and the Jayhawks. But it's really tough to slice it up because you can look at any single circumstance that happened throughout that game to even send the game to OT. So I don't think Bill Self really should be kicking himself too much. It's the game of basketball, and it is what it is. Connor, what do you got to say?
Yeah. I would say, I guess, what the hindsight is 2020 always, no doubt about that. But in my, this is just my estimation. If I'm head coach of Kansas, which there's probably plenty of reasons I'm not, but typically I would tend to lean towards the idea of, maybe if there's 10 seconds left, we're calling a timeout. If there's much less than that, we're probably not going to be able to get up a great shot regardless. And like I said, maybe that's wrong of me to think, but when the best player on your team has the ball in his hands, at the top of the key, 5 seconds left, I'm probably just going to let him, try and make something happen. And game probably looked a lot different if that timeout wasn't called. Who knows? If they called timeout, drew up a play, Jalen Wilson or somebody else hit the 3 or they score, we're not having this conversation. They might have a pretty good chance going on to win the game probably, but the fact that didn't happen makes it a bigger deal. I think the main point being if your best player has the ball in their hands with 5 seconds, probably just best to let him go, especially if he already has like 35 or whatever he had.
I'm with you, Coach Matlock, and I think the time on the shot clock is a big piece there. He had about 5 seconds when he called that time out left on the shot clock. So you said 10 seconds. That, I can side with you there. But it's easy for us to say this now, talking on some computers in a studio here, and not in overtime against undefeated team in the clutch. But Bill Self is taking accountability. He was interviewed by ESPN afterwards, and he takes full accountability for the miscues. He says that it's his fault, and I'll just read his quote right here before we move on. He said, "We didn't get a shot, and then I call timeout, and Wilson makes the bomb too. So that could have been the difference between winning and losing." And he pretty much sums it up. That's all there is to say about it. He called the timeout, and you got to live with the results. You lost to a great team on the road, and he knows it. But it's the regular season, and you get to play again in a few days, and everybody's going to be all right.
Hey, real quick, Cody, real quick.
Yes,
I got to
sir.
ask you guys a question. So in this scenario, I'm a referee. I'm an MHSAA referee. I referee, basketball, high school, middle school, etc., boys and girls. So in this scenario for Bill Self to call a timeout and stop play, obviously the ball, the shot is called off from Jalen Wilson. The 3 does not count. In that scenario, where is the threshold? Is it when Bill Self calls a timeout, or is it when the referee addresses the timeout? Because if the referee doesn't hear Bill Self for another second and a half, and Jalen Wilson releases that ball, and basically when the clock is running, does that 3-pointer count, or what's the deal there? Because they had to go to the monitor on that play. I guess what's the
Yeah.
verdict there? How is that determined?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion, and this might, and maybe it's not really I don't know if it's an opinion question or what it should be or what the actual rule is, but it seems to me like it should most certainly be when the referee actually signals timeout happening.
Right.
A coach calling it can be a bit more subjective. Like, is it when he says timeout? Is it when he hits him with the T sign? Is it when, what it's a lot harder to dictate that versus, ref sticking his arm up, blowing the whistle, that a timeout was called, that the play stopped. So I think that certainly has to be the way to go about it, because if it was anything else, I think you'd probably you'd see some coaches like being like, oh no, you got to look back at the monitor. See, like if for whatever reason, say like he wanted it to be called earlier, because maybe they turn the ball over, but he's like, oh, I called a timeout, look. And like you can see him like over, standing there just going like this, but he kind of like half calls it. If the ref doesn't hear that, I think that's on the coach then. I think it's the coach's job to get the ref's attention to call a timeout, and the play does not stop until the ref grants the timeout.
Okay. Cody, do you have anything to add right there?
Yeah, I think his points on Connor's points on subjectivity really kind of paints the picture of what it should be. Even though I guarantee every coach right now in the NCAA is going to argue opposite of our stance right now. But
Really?
even as a guy who operates, in the control room a lot for broadcast, EMU, ESPN, as a replay operator, I wouldn't want the task of having to decipher between, his hand signals or if he was saying it out loud. And so I think we got to leave that one up to the ref. Do you have some insight? Was this a test for us, Commissioner?
I think it was a
Mr.
test, but
Ref.
it's an open-ended question. I mean, there's no right or wrong answers. I think you're both correct. I think you have to go off of the referee's signal of the timeout, of acknowledging, okay, I got a coach over here calling a timeout. I'm going to acknowledge that in real time. And then if we have to go to the monitor, then we go to the monitor. I think it's a lot more difficult call to make if you don't have the luxury of having a monitor to go to use as your reference point. So they have to go off of the referee. That's what they did in this case, and that's the call you got to make. I think even if you're a monitor ref, whoever you are in that situation, you got to go off the referee's whistle and his call. So, case closed. I like it.
Very good, very good. Let's move on to a little bit of Kentucky basketball. The team's been down a little bit this year, at least experiencing a rough stretch. They did get a big win over Tennessee over the weekend, a team that I just pegged as a contender, which, just a loss doesn't matter. It's still Kentucky. They're coached by a great coach, and they have a hell of a guy playing forward for them, and that is Oscar Tshiebwe, and he's getting our first college basketball shot of gin of the year of 2023. Congratulations, Oscar. What an honor. And, what a night he had against the Georgia Bulldogs on Tuesday. 37 points, 24 rebounds, 3 steals. He had his hand in the cookie jar, and then 13 for 18 at the line. Really just showcasing his ability to get to the line, draw the contact. And he was the SEC Player of the Year last year. He collected a few more accolades, and I think he's going to be holding a few more when all is said and done this year. Kentucky's projection as a basketball team in the postseason is in question right now by us here at Gen Sports and the experts, but Oscar Tshiebwe's basketball playing ability is not. And we were just talking about how dominant Zach Edey is every night in and out. Oscar Tshiebwe is also making a pretty good run at it as well. And one fun fact for you that applies to both Tshiebwe and Edey, some of the big men really making a name for themselves this year in college basketball. They have never attempted a 3 point shot in their whole career at Kentucky or at Purdue. Edie 3 years at Purdue and Toshibwe 4 years at Kentucky have never even just been open and chucked one for the hell of it. What do you guys got to say about, I guess, that fun fact and Oscar Toshibwe's performance on the hardwood?
All I gotta say is I bet Matt Painter and John Calipari, they have to be giving these guys, these big men, death threats. They got to be saying, "Hey, if you even try to shoot a three, you're never gonna see the hardwood again." Okay, I don't know. I'm kidding. I don't think that's the case, but there's got to be some kind of incentive or a de-incentive to not have these guys shoot threes. He doesn't want to have these guys shoot threes. They're paint players. So he wants them, both he, Matt Painter, and John Calipari alike. They want to incentivize the points down low. They want to make sure they're staying close to the rim. They don't want them really outside around the arc. They don't belong out there. So I think that he's ingrained that very very vividly in their play style and just how they carry themselves on the court. And I think it's proven to be very successful. So there's a method to their madness, but I'm sure that there's been words exchanged from both respected coaches and both respected players to say, hey, we don't need you shooting threes. If you're out here, you probably shouldn't be out here in the first place, but don't pull the trigger out here. I don't know. There's got to be something happening, but there's a method to their madness. I could say that.
Yeah. Maybe the only time you'll see it is halftime buzzer beater or something. They just happen to have the ball in their hands and chuck one up from half court, something like that.
Right.
But no, Kentucky's been an interesting team. Certainly has all the talent in the world. And Oscar Tshiebwe, talk about a guy pretty much carrying the load for the team. That's just trying to, probably at this point, still fighting for a tournament spot, really, or at least seeding. I think from, at least from what I've watched, this Kentucky team looks a lot different than what you've seen in the past. You don't see, you see the athleticism, but maybe you don't see the effort on the defensive end that you'd like to see. Some really poor shooting, which maybe is why it's gonna have to be the Oscar Tshiebwe show if Kentucky wants to make any sort of a run in the tournament or in the latter half of SEC play. But yeah, nothing much else to say other than this isn't your typical Kentucky team, but doesn't mean they can't make a little noise to close out the regular season.
Definitely. Yeah, it's just a little bit interesting. Yeah, 9 days ago, there was an article released about a fan getting ejected at Kentucky at one of the games for having a sign in the stands that was speculating John Calipari going to Texas and taking the head coaching job there. So just kind of funny to see the state of Kentucky basketball. And as someone who I was in the city last year when they fell to St. Peter's in this first round, so that was just sweet dessert there. And
Probably awesome.
yeah, it was great, man. Just watching them roll in Indianapolis all day, celebrate, get drunk, and then just fucking get pissed at 8 p.m. watching their team lose to a team they probably have never heard of. I mean, St. Peter's had a great run, but last year we're entering March Madness, who's St. Peter's, and then the Kentucky Wildcats lose to them. So just interesting to see. Yeah, we'll keep it in the SEC. We'll move on from Kentucky. We're going to go to a team that is dominating the SEC, and that is number 4, Unfortunately for Alabama, he probably won't last long as a Crimson Tide player. He's probably headed for the NBA after this year. Lots of people looking at his talents and projecting him as a lottery pick. Do you guys have anything to add about Alabama and their surprise breakout season this year?
All I'm going to say is Alabama is
Yeah.
now a basketball school. It can't be argued against. At this point, with the teams that they've beaten, by the margins they've beaten them by, I am seeing a new light in the Alabama Crimson Tide core for basketball. Now, that's something I probably wouldn't have said last year. They had some success last year. I thought it was a fluke. I thought it was something that was going to be short-lived, that wasn't going to last long, that wasn't going to transition into this season, but I couldn't have been more wrong. We've seen them beat several teams that they really shouldn't be in the same league with, and I'm always going to refer back to that one game, I think it was the Phil Knight Invitational, where they beat then one-ranked North Carolina, in the blue boys. That was devastating. That's when I knew that one, UNC is not going to live up to the hype, and they haven't. And they're transitioning some of their bad habits that they had and why they lost last year in March Madness. I believe they lost to St. Peter's too. That is something that we have to consider. And they brought those bad habits into this season. The exact opposite happened for Alabama and the Crimson Tide in their basketball program. So they're going to be a threat come March. You're gonna see them faced off against good teams in the bracket, and you're going to be picking them. And it might be an upset on paper, or at least historically, but I can tell you this: they're going to be a serious threat come March, and they're going to be a team that's going to be a force to be reckoned with, no matter who they play. So watch out.
Yeah. Certainly not a team I would want to get in front of when they got the momentum that they're playing with now. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head, both of you. But yeah, Alabama probably safe to say, at least for this year, a basketball school. We'll reevaluate come this time next year after college football season's over. But
That's crazy to say that,
yeah,
though,
no,
right?
Nate Oates got him playing great. Isn't it weird? You never thought
Yeah,
you'd say it.
never.
But yeah, they got him playing great. Yeah, I looked earlier. Alabama, I think, has something around the 20th incoming recruit ranked incoming recruiting class basketball. So, getting guys like Brandon Miller, who I'm just looking at his, hadn't dove too deep into his stats, but 20 points a game on 46%, 47% from the field, 46% 3-point shooting, grabbing 8 rebounds a game. Yeah, 6'9", looks like your prototypical NBA player. I've only watched a couple games of Alabama, but in what I have watched, I think that'll be a guy you'll see play this year, and not much afterwards. You'll be watching him as a first round draft pick next year. But yeah, interesting to see Alabama basketball be not just a one hit wonder. We'll see how it goes throughout the rest of the year, though.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Alabama basketball and Brandon Miller, you better take advantage of it because it's not going to last long. He is headed for bigger and better things. He's going to get the bag, as they say, and he's fun to watch. So tune in. He's super expressive. Hits the three. He's dancing. His teammates are all into it, and it's a great time. And it's fun. You kind of couldn't even say that they're a basketball school with a straight face, but that is the fact, you guys.
No.
That's what's going on, at least until next college football season, and we'll see what Nick Saban has cooking for us. Let's
Until the
leave
football
the
team punches us in the face, making that statement.
yeah. I mean, I don't want Michigan Wolverines to play Alabama for no reason. So
No, right.
we'll just leave that out there too, and we'll leave football in 2022 because that's where I'd like to leave it. Anyway, we'll go to the Big East. We don't most recent sour taste is from Villanova defeating Michigan in the national championship, a couple years ago. That one is always going to hurt. But it's not really Villanova sticking out in the Big East this year. It's teams like Xavier and DePaul. And just the fact that they're kind of susceptible. UConn as well was ranked really highly at one point. I think they were all the way up to the 3 and 4 region. They started 14 and 0, and John pointed that out on last episode. And then since 15 and 5, so quite the dramatic turn for the Huskies and a program that's not really accustomed to dealing with losses. What do you guys have to say about the Big East play? I know that John was tuned into that Seton Hall game.
Yeah, that Seton Hall game, huge win for Seton Hall. And got to take your hat off to Shaheen Holloway, coming off that hell of a season with St. Peter's. And I did misspeak earlier. They did lose to UNC, but they beat Purdue, so that they did have a big win under their belt. But you got to look at this, at the Seton Hall team and what they're capable of, and they can come back and face adversity, and really they can shine when nobody expects them to. And I was very impressed with what they had to do to win that game last night. And they faced adversity right in the face, looked at adversity right in the face, right in the eyes, and said, hey, we're going to win this game. We're going to come back. We're going to win. And they did exactly that. So I was impressed to see that. And, to see a team really do that, especially with a new coach and, face adversity, do what you got to do to win the game. And I think that's what Shaheen Holloway's preached for a long time, both at his time at St. Peter's. And I think he carried over a lot of that stuff into his coaching career here. And, to beat a team like UConn is a huge win. You got a couple coaches out with COVID. Now, you can hang your head about that or not, but UConn had a hell of a lead there early on. They fought back and they made it happen. I believe they fought back from a 17-point deficit. And, to come back from that kind of deficit, and yes, you're playing in front of your home crowd, but you gotta make a splash in front of your home crowd. New coach, new mentality. You got March coming up. Your knees up deep. Your knees deep into conference play. You got to show out for your fans. You got to show out for your team and your new coach. Hell of a performance by Seton Hall and the Pirates. Really impressive.
Yeah. My main thing about the Big East is, at least from my perspective, is what was looking. That's been the more difficult portion of their Big East schedule that they've been losing. But they've had a few big wins. I think they beat Alabama earlier in the year. Their non-conference schedule was maybe a little sus, but yeah, a team that's still really highly ranked and respected, especially if you care anything about other college basketball analytics. A lot of them still have them as a top 10, top 5 team. So certainly looking up for them, and probably, in my opinion, the team to watch out for in the Big East. That might not be a crazy statement to make, but the team that I'll be keeping my close eye on.
All right, guys, that is going to bring us to the end of our scheduled topics for the show tonight. I'm just going to take us around the college basketball arena tonight, give us some score updates, and then I'll have you guys close it for me. Purdue just absolutely suffocates Minnesota and beats them 61-39. They held the team to 39 points. That's pretty impressive from the number 3 Boilermakers. John's Michigan State Spartans knock off 23 Rutgers in EL by a considerable margin. And just as the Rutgers, got a little taste of the top 25, the Spartans and Tom Izzo bring them crashing back down. I'll let them talk about that real quick in a moment. I had John tell you guys all last week that Gonzaga may be a pretender. Don't look now, but they're in a tight one at home, 33-32 to LMU. I'm not even sure what that acronym is for, what university LMU is, but just gonna say
It's the
it's not.
Loyola Marymount Lions.
Okay, thank you, sir. I knew you're gonna have that info for me. So the number one seed going into March Madness last year is in a really a 1 point game at halftime with Loyola Marymount Lions. So do with that information what you will. Only other one that looks really good tonight is yet to start. It's going to go on in the Pac-12. Number 5 UCLA is at Arizona State. UCLA is 16-2, and Arizona State is 15-3. UCLA is a 4.5 point favorite, so should be a pretty good one. It's going to be on FS1 if you guys want to check it out after the show. You guys have anything you want to close with?
Real quick. I got to talk about the Xavier DePaul game last night.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That was a hell of a game. The Blue Demons, don't count them out. Don't call it a comeback. They came back and won that game against 8th-ranked Xavier, first in the nation for assists, across the league. And after beating teams like Creighton, Marquette, and Villanova, I mean that's a great. Capable of upsetting really good teams come March, and just teams to look out for. These teams are going to be flying under the radar. They have been flying under the radar for a long time, but you see them pull these wins, you know what they're capable of. You know they're going to be a threat. So when you're doing your bracket in March or before March, February, late February, keep these things in mind. These teams have players that are playmakers. They have players coming off the bench that are going to be a serious threat to good teams. And if they find those holes, they're going to find kryptonite in good teams, and they're going to beat them, at least half of the time. So just teams to watch out for. And the Big East, it's heating up. I mean, they're rivaling the Big Ten as far as strength of conference. That's all I'm going to say. I'll leave you guys with that.
Yeah, I'll just close by doing something I typically swear I'll never do. But I'm gonna just have to give Michigan State a little bit of credit.
There you go.
As a Michigan fan, I tend to sit in circles where we talk about mostly negative in the way of MSU, and I work with quite a bit of MSU fans who haven't been so optimistic about the season to this point, but from a non-fan's perspective, I still think MSU has been relatively impressive, given especially given their roster of not a go-to scorer. There's not a great guy inside or anything like that. So the win against Rutgers kind of solidifies that. They really probably should have beat Purdue the other night. And they've had a couple of good wins on the road. I think they went on the road to beat Wisconsin the other night. They've had a couple of good road Big Ten wins, and so they've impressed me. I mean, I think way back to earlier in the season they played Gonzaga on the boat, and had probably a game they should have won there as well. So I think MSU is playing well at the right time. We'll see where it goes from here, but I'll just give them the props that they probably deserve.
Yeah, I like you bringing up some of those early schedule opponents like Gonzaga. They actually played Kentucky early on in the season, beat them in double overtime. They've played Alabama, the team that we're pretty high on over here. So even though, some of those, like Alabama, that's a loss, still you were competitive with them, and that experience in game is going to do wonders for you late in the season. So that's what we're going to be looking for.
Good stuff, guys.
Absolutely.
Hey, I just want to make sure everybody, stay with us for college basketball. We're here to stay, and we're very excited. It's heating up. College basketball is our first priority from here on out until March. And then it's all about recruits, not only for college basketball, but for college football. There's a lot of stuff going to be happening in the offseason. Coaching carousel is going to be heating up more than it ever has. NIL deals, people, scandals, stuff going on. There's a ton of stuff going on, guys. So get hype about it. Get hype with us and stay with us. Make sure to check us out on social media. Check out our link tree. It has all of our links in it. Go to our website, ginsportsnetwork.com, for all of our articles, IG posts, and updates. And we'll look forward to seeing you on there. Make sure to contact us, get a hold of us however you want to. Remember, we love controversy. We'll look it right in the eyes and face it face to face. We're happy to do it. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. So good stuff, guys. We'll leave it at that. For now, I'm John Jay with Connor Matlock and Cody Almasy with the Gin College Podcast. Have a great night.